Welcome to episode 2 of the Brád-Cast. My name is Anthony Brady, and today I'm going to be getting into what is WFM Anyway. So before I begin, I want to just kind of first of all mention the lovely new microphone that I am currently speaking into. My wonderful wife, who is probably my biggest supporter, invested in this podcast already. So hopefully you're noticing a considerable improvement in the audio quality. I did consider going back and re-recording episode 1, which was just a little introduction to what this whole podcast is going to be about, etc., etc. But I decided no, leave it, warts and all. Let's just leave it. Let's just leave it there. I also wanted to mention. I mentioned a couple of podcasts on episode 1 that I took inspiration from, and having listened back to that particular episode 100 million times at this stage, I realised I'd probably left 2 very important, shall we call them, influences or inspirations. The number 1 is probably one of my most favourite movies, is The Commitments from the very, very early 90s. A brilliant movie if anyone hasn't seen it. But of course, the movie is narrated by Jimmy Rabbit Jr., who essentially interviews himself and kind of, has these sort of, lives out his own kind of inner monologue about interviewing himself, about how he became successful, etc., etc. So I think probably Jimmy Rabbit Commitments is probably where, I take my most... my biggest influence from. And secondly, I don't know how I forgot to mention the wonderful Irina Mativa of Right WFM, who very kindly invited me to be a guest on her podcast a little over a year ago. That's out there on YouTube. If you want to go and hear and see that. I think at that time I spent about 45 minutes talking about learning from mistakes. Yeah, it's still there, and yeah, apologies, Irina, if you're listening to this, that I didn't think of you immediately. So yeah, anyway, that's the kind of admin out of the way. So yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about what is WFM Anyway. I figured this was probably an ideal opening topic to start with. It's something, that sometimes people ask me, what is WFM? And of course, it's almost become a cliche at this stage, what is WFM? And the cliche answer is usually something along the lines of, well, WFM are about figuring out the right number of people in the right place in the right time, sometimes adding in with the right skills as well is usually an addition. And that's all true. That's all true. But I suppose what I've kind of come to learn about having been involved in workforce management for over 20 years is it's a collection of functions. It's a collection of kind of almost standalone teams in their own right that are very, very, very closely connected to each other, right? So usually I like to kind of think about workforce management as beginning with capacity planning. And of course, there's going to be episodes where I'm going to talk about capacity planning, and everything that I'm going to mention here is going to be mentioned in great detail. But for the purposes of just kind of high level, what is workforce management? So it usually starts with capacity planning, sometimes known as budget planning as well, but capacity planning. Then there's forecasting, sometimes known as short-term forecasting. Of course, we got scheduling, or in other kind of non-contact center environments, this is sometimes referred to as rostering. So yeah, scheduling. Then of course we've got our real-time management, which very near and dear to my heart, because I think it's really where I started learning about workforce management. And again, there will be an episode where we'll dive into real-time management in great detail. Reporting as well is another one. Often reporting, if it's operational reporting, it's sometimes out there on its own. Yeah, it's out there on its own, and some people do take the view of like it's reporting lives outside workforce management and it should be treated as such. However, what I've come to learn is that workforce management are probably the most hungry for operational data. And also a lot of the information, a lot of the data that typically flows around a workforce management, a lot of the information that typically flows around an operation is actually coming from workforce management source systems, whether it's coming directly off the phone switch or whether it's coming out of a source WFM system. So tracking all sorts of goodies like, call volume, abandon rates, average speed of answers, handle times, and on and on and on. So really, really, whether reporting is inside or specifically outside, I think, it's my opinion, reporting is very, very closely connected to workforce management. And if you're inside workforce management and you're taking the opinion that reporting is not part of workforce management, then okay, cool. I'd love to hear from you and love to debate that with you. I don't have all the answers. I just have all the battle scars of 20 odd years of kind of working through this. So yeah. Another thing I want to say about this, in this sort of this question about what is workforce management anyway, is it sometimes gets labeled as being part of HR, human resources. So it's like, so sometimes you kind of say, as soon as you start mentioning, it's to do with workforce planning, resource planning, it's to do with people, people will sometimes go, oh, okay, so it's part of HR. And I get that. Having recently attended 2 years on an MBA, there was actually a specific module for HR, and it was mentioned in that module that, of all the various things that go on inside a human resource department, workforce management was included. And I was like, oh, really? That hasn't been my experience. I would probably push back and say, no, I don't believe that workforce management is part of human resources. It's different. Human resources is usually kind of concerned with matters that are to do with, the environment that employees are employed under, the terms and conditions, the pay rules, the kind of anything to do with the rules, around people's employment. Workforce management is primarily more concerned with having the right number of people in the right place at the right time, and I suppose more recently, in probably the last 5 to 10 years, this aspect of strategic workforce planning has come into play, which is not just it's challenging ourselves to kind of think about workforce management as not just the right number of people. It's about having the right number of people with the right skills, and then looking internally to kind of go, right, do we have the right number of people currently with the right skills? What are our future needs going to look like? Do we have them? Will we need to hire them? Will we need to get them in externally, or is there a possibility for us to upskill, promote from within? That's a whole kind of area, strategic workforce planning. And again, there'll be an episode on it specifically, no doubt. So wrapping it all up, that is what workforce management is. I don't stand on the side of the fence where I would subscribe to workforce management being part of HR. But again, I'd love to hear from you, and if you want to challenge me on that, please do drop me a note and let me know. Now, here's another thing. Workforce management. Here's a question as I talk to myself, right? Is workforce management a strategic partner, or are they just merely a support function? It's a great question, and for me, again, my experience, and if you're listening to these podcasts and you're trying to other than just kind of laugh at my ramblings into a microphone, but if you're listening here and you're trying to kind of gain a little bit of insight as to what is workforce management really, and kind of learn a little bit as we go along, it's probably been one of the things that I have tried to identify as quickly as possible with any new organization that I work with, or any new client that I work with, is like, so when somebody comes along to you and says, I love the phrase, we need workforce management. There's a lot in that. You gotta be prepared to kind of really question that, because we need workforce management means 100 different things to 100 different people, right? So it broadly divides down into a couple of areas, I think. The first area that when people say we need workforce management is, unfortunately, it is a truth and a reality. It's not something I like to be an ambassador for this particular opinion. And what I'm about to say is that sometimes, unfortunately, workforce management are called upon to be the what organizations look for when cuts need to be made, efficiencies need to be found. And so unfairly, I think workforce management sometimes unfairly gets tagged with this sort of like, if organizations or if the people working in an organization see the workforce management people coming, it's usually not good news, right? It's usually like, oh my God, right, this is where we're at, or if an organization already has workforce management, but then they start engaging with workforce management in a way that they probably haven't done in a long time. Again, it's usually coming from a place of high level pressure has come on or is coming down, saying we need to find, we need, I'm sure a lot of you will have heard the phrase, we need to figure out how to do more with less. And workforce management would be the people to help figure that out. Now, I'm going to talk not necessarily in this episode specifically. We're going to have plenty of episodes to kind of dive into it. Workforce management are not magicians. We don't have magic, and usually what workforce management is actually about, when the game is, if the game that you're in is about trying to go after those efficiencies and trying to figure out how to do more with less, it's not necessarily just about running mathematical kind of equations and kind of saying, oh yeah, hey, here you go. It's about trade-offs. It's about helping leaders, operational leaders, to understand you can achieve an efficiency here, but there's always a consequence. That's something I think I'll stand over. I defy anyone to tell me where there's opportunities to find an efficiency without something being traded off, right? It's finding the trade-offs, and then it becomes a whole kind of thing about negotiating through those trade-offs, right? And kind of trying to work with, because every leader, every organization is going to be different, right? They're going to what's acceptable to one organization will just absolutely not be acceptable to another. So that's kind of one aspect of like answering this question: is workforce management a strategic partner or a support function? If you're in the support function and you're being called upon to be the, help us do more with less, that's definitely one avenue. I think that's one bracket I think a lot of organizational leaders have in their mind when they say the words, we need your help, we need workforce management, can you help us take a look at this? It's usually from it's the genesis of their idea is they're looking for cuts. And it's not I've been in those places, of course, right, where that's the gig, right? And I think it's worth saying that from the position of a workforce management practitioner, it's not exactly, it's fun, it's engaging and it's rewarding to get to a point, but if that becomes the continuous cycle where that's all we're ever doing, we're just kind of like, okay, we found efficiencies, and if that then rolls into, okay, great, we've got some efficiencies, where's the next one's coming from? Where's the next one? It's just squeezing until we've squeezed practically the life out of it, and all of the kind of bad stuff that typically starts to happen, like attrition and high absenteeism rates, and when all these things start to happen and everyone starts getting just a little bit overly stressed and kind of agitated about the whole thing, it's not a great place to be in, and therefore that's why I would not subscribe to workforce management as a support function only, as a that this is the mode that what's the modus operandum, I think I have that right. If that's the mode long term, it doesn't, I feel like that doesn't really work long term. So therefore, it brings us to this sort of other aspect of it, which is the more pleasant side of it is that when organizations, when they say we need workforce management, they are hopefully coming at it from the perspective of we see you as being a strategic partner to our business, to our operation. We see you as somebody who could help us to grow, or we have growth in mind, and we're planning to get from point A to point B, and we'd like to do so in a smart way and not just in a kind of a back of the envelope sort of way, which is like within their organization, some conversations have been had that says we're going to grow our customer base from here to here, but they don't necessarily just want the workforce to just grow exponentially in line with that. That's a much more enjoyable space to be in. So that's kind of like where I see the workforce management, like what is it, right? It generally, it can either be, often it's one or the other of those two very, very broad areas. For me, I like it when, often it starts off as being the support function, help us find the cuts, help us find the efficiencies. For me, the payoff or the reward professionally as a workforce management as I said in episode 1, as being a workforce management obsessive, is that if you can work through that to get us to okay, we found the cuts, we found the efficiencies, now let's have what we might call business as usual. This is where we are, this is where we want to rest, and now we can kind of now move more into the strategic space, right? Now we can now move into okay, so now what are we going to do now with this new baseline position that we have, and hopefully it's a position that everyone's happy with. How do we move forward from here? And so you hopefully you get what I'm trying to say here, which is that workforce management, what is it anyway? It means so many different things to different people. And sometimes, kind of going back to the efficiencies piece, sometimes it's about when people reach for their workforce management team, they're merely looking for the how do we do more with less, or what do we do here, or how do we solve this particular situation that we find ourselves in. And sometimes the answer is we need extra headcount. The reason why you're in this situation is because you're just, if you break it down and you look at it objectively, you've got an understaffing situation here, and you couldn't quite clearly see it. And I've been in situations before where, you highlight that to a leader and they kind of go, well, anyone can do that. Anyone. I didn't need you to tell me that I could solve my problems by merely reaching for my checkbook and buying more resources. Of course that's going to improve the situation, and it's a very, it might be very honest, it might be very but it is very disrespectful to this thing called workforce management. It's not just, I hope people don't think that workforce management is just about, it's a mathematical equation, some sort of secret code or something to just how do we solve an equation. There was a great leader I worked with years ago, back in my PayPal days, and I think she put it best when she said that workforce management, it's this mix of art and science. There's a lot of science, a lot of maths, there's a lot of workload calculations, shrinkage calculations, working out kind of new hire ramp models. There's a lot of kind of hard maths that goes on, and that's the science. But the art is also in there as well, which is that it's about being a business partner, understanding where the business is going, where they want to go, what's coming down the track, what's the best strategic plan to get there. So they're all the bits that I personally love about being in workforce management, because every day is a new day, every week's a new week. Every organization is different, and they all want different things. And of course, you can be in an organization for a long time and things change quickly. You know, you've got a set of leaders who have a particular vision and a particular angle, and unfortunately sometimes that you might be in a situation where you're in a workforce management group where they're in that strategic mode, right? You know, but then things change, leaders move out, new leaders come in, and it's unfortunately well, screw that. We are not strategic anymore. Now it's all about finding the cuts and the efficiencies again, and so you see how it kind of ebbs and flows. So I suppose my roundabout ultimate answer for what is workforce management anyway, it's all of these things. It's all of them, and it's about being able to kind of understand how workforce management can apply to your operation, to whatever it is that you're hoping to achieve. So right back to the very start, it's about, so when somebody comes to you and says, we need workforce management, can you help? It's like, before you say yes, because the answer always is yes, workforce management, we always can help. But before you say yes, you've got to be prepared to say, okay, talk to me, help me understand what it is you're trying to do. Why are you trying to do that? What's been going on? What's the motivation? And hopefully if you can work through an honest conversation there and get to and you kind of understand. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes it is, listen, we're in a spot here. We've got budget pressures. We've got all sorts of pressures. Our growth plans didn't play out the way we hoped that they would. So we got to cut. We've got to figure out how to run our operation 10% less than what we have. Help us do it. I'd be kind of like, yeah, no problem. We can certainly dig into that and figure that out together. And let's work out a plan to get us to a place where we can keep the wheels turning, but 10% less. But what I would suggest, or what I'd hope to anyone who's in that situation is like, okay, let's agree a time frame. So 10% by when? At what point in time are we going to say, okay, we're there now? Or is this going to quickly turn into, oh yeah, I see we're starting to kind of make improvements, and we keep pushing the goalposts out and out. So we're in this sort of entering into this never ending cycle of chasing efficiencies and chasing, a race to the bottom. And the bottom is not good. I've been there too, right? I've been there where organizations have squeezed so hard that it's like they wake up one day and all the staff have left, right? They've because, and again, I'll have a podcast on this specifically. The most important people in any organization are the people who actually deal with your customers, the frontline staff. They need to be listened to, they need to be understood, their needs need to be respected. And so therefore, if you're workforce planning and you're chasing cuts and efficiencies, you can at the end of that process, if you just push too much on that, it's going to hurt, right? You're going to get to a place where you're going to get a shock. I promise you, right? Not efficiency. You're going to get to a place where attrition and sickness are going to be part of your world, and now you're going to be trying to. You're very quickly going to be on the other side of the coin and going, oh, how do I hire people back again? And maybe we need to higher wages, and so it's you need to be careful. So yeah, workforce management. So that's been episode 2. I see I've been talking here for 24 minutes. Yeah, hopefully there's some cheesy rock music beginning to intro at this point and kind of help fade out the end of this episode. Thank you again for your time. Episode 3 will be along in a week, and we'll have episode 4 a week after that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. I've been Anthony Brady, and this has been The Brád-Cast. See you next week.